Hello class. Now we're going to take a look at the case problem analysis from chapter 39. We'll take a look at both the part that goes over the facts, identifying the facts, and we'll do the second part, which is titled the what if, what if the facts were different. So let me get the problem up here on the screen. There it goes. And let me read through this with you, and then we'll go about answering the questions. All right, here's what happened. Smith Services was a trucking company established in 2000 and owned by Tony Smith as the sole shareholder. Smith Services had an account with Laker Express, a fuel provider, and often would charge fuel purchases for the company trucks to that account. Smith's employees would fuel their vehicles and sign the account slip with a notation that the purchase was for Smith Services, Inc. Laker Express would bill Smith Services regularly for the charges on the account. After several months of low business, Smith Services ceased doing business and was dissolved in 2013, with its assets being distributed to creditors. Laker Express only recovered a small part of the amount owed by Smith Services, Inc. Tony Smith then opened a new trucking service business as a sole proprietor. Laker Express sought to recover Smith Services' unpaid fuel charges, which amounted to about $35,000 from Smith. He, Mr. Smith, argued that he was not personally liable for a corporate debt. Should a court hold Tony Smith personally liable? All right, so what did we look at in Chapter 39? In Chapter 39, we learned how a corporation is responsible for its own debts, and its investors, its owners, have limited personal liability, meaning that they only are liable to the extent of their investment in the corporate entity. And so as long as the shareholder, the owner of the corporation, honors and follows all of the rules that govern the operations of a corporation, they should be well protected from personal liability. So in this problem that we're looking at, short of any information that would indicate Tony Smith has done anything to lose his limited personal liability, it would seem that he should have protection from any of the remaining corporate debts. So let's just walk through the questions and answer them together. All right, number one, Smith Services, Inc. was a, what type of entity is it? Is it a corporation, a partnership, or a limited liability company? Well, it's pretty clear. They tell you in the facts that it's a corporation. Let's take a look at the following questions. Number two, a business of this type is or is not considered a separate legal entity from its owners. All right, we have a corporation. It definitely is considered a separate legal entity from its owner, Tony Smith. When Smith Services, Inc. set up an account with Laker Express, Tony Smith, Laker Express, Smith Services, Inc., which of these would be liable for any charges on that account? All right, Smith Services, Inc. set it up. Smith Services, Inc. would be liable for any of the charges. Right, number four, when Smith Services, Inc. dissolved, it apparently did or did not owe money to creditors. Well, based on the facts, it did, right? It did owe money at the time it dissolved, and it was not able to pay all the creditors at the time it dissolved. All right, let's take a look at number five. I'll move the screen, adjust the screen. Here we go. Laker Express was or was not a creditor and was or was not able to recover the amount owed from Smith Services, Inc. All right, Laker Express was a creditor, right? They had outstanding bills that had not been paid, and they were not able to recover all of it that was owed by Smith Services, okay? So first was a creditor and was not able to recover the amount owed, not in full. Number six, Tony Smith, who is he? Was he a shareholder in Smith Services or was he not a shareholder? He was. This again is just factual information. Number 7, one of the advantages of being a shareholder in a corporation is the blank. Is it limited or unlimited liability of shareholders? And this is what we've been learning. It is the limited liability of shareholders, limited personal liability of shareholders. Number 8, the principle of limited shareholder liability means that shareholders are not personally liable for the debts of the corporation beyond their investment in the corporation or their personal net worth. Well, this is what we've been learning as well. They are not liable for the debts of the corporation beyond their investment in the corporation. Number 9, if Smith Services Inc. was dissolved and assets were distributed, then Tony Smith likely lost or earned the value of his investment. Well, what do you think happened here? Smith Services was dissolved, it still had outstanding debts. What do you think happened to Tony's investment? It was lost. He didn't get any return on his investment. He has outstanding debts still. All right. Number 10. Tony Smith might or would not have had assets outside of the company that he would have been allowed to keep when the company was dissolved. Okay, so what do we know? He probably does have. Okay, he might have assets outside the company. Not everything that he owned was put into the company. So he probably has some assets, a personal bank account. Maybe he owns his house. He has a car. Okay, these are all his own personal assets. They are outside the company, and that means then that Laker Express and any other creditors to the company, the corporation, cannot reach them. All right, number 11. If Laker Express is attempting to receive payment from the extra assets of a shareholder, it would be asking the court to do blank. Let's see our options. What would Laker Express be asking? Would it be asking the court to pierce the corporate veil, declare an ultra-virus act, or to revoke the corporation's status? All right, so we took a look at this in Chapter 39 as well. What Laker Express would be asking the court to do would be to pierce, to go through the corporate veil, the protection of the corporate veil, and to reach Tony Smith's personal assets. Now, in order to do that, we know that there needs to be certain circumstances, all right? And we're going to take a look at those in the next few questions, those circumstances. And so looking at number 12, courts will ignore the corporate structure and make the shareholder owners personally liable when the corporate structure is used or abused, which fits in there, used or abused for personal benefit. And so if it's the corporate structure is abused for personal benefit, or when the corporate form is distinguishable or not indistinguishable, I was going to say not distinguishable, or indistinguishable from the controlling shareholder. And so if it's indistinguishable from the controlling shareholder, so it's as if the corporation and the individual controlling shareholder are one and the same, that's when the courts will be willing to pierce the veil. All right, number 13. In this situation, it appears or does not appear that Laker Express was tricked into dealing with the corporation instead of the individual. Do you see anything that indicates some kind of trick or fraud on Laker Express? No, we do not. So in this situation, it does not appear that Laker Express was tricked into dealing with the corporation instead of with Tony Smith. And let me move the questions up a bit. All right, number 14. Given the life of the corporation, it appears or does not appear that the corporation was set up to always be insolvent. Any indication of that? No indication. All right, so it does not appear that the corporation was set up to always be insolvent or was undercapitalized. It also appears or does not appear that the corporation was formed to evade a legal obligation. No facts to support that, so does not appear as well in the second blank. Right, moving on to number 15. There is or is no evidence that the corporate formalities were not followed. There is no evidence that the formalities were not followed, and there is or is no evidence that Tony Smith commingled, mixed up his personal funds with the corporation's. There is no evidence of that. All right, so we have not met any of the criteria that would typically be looked for in order to permit the law to pierce, or the court to pierce, the corporation's veil. All right, so number 16, this is the conclusion statement here. Given these facts, a court should or should not pierce the veil of Smith Services and hold Tony Smith personally responsible for the debt. All right, so given these facts, a court should not pierce the veil of Smith Services and hold Tony Smith liable. All right, we're going to move now from this main section of the case problem analysis and take a look at the what if. The what if the facts were different exercise. So let me get that loaded up here. Here it is. And there are a handful of questions in this exercise. All right, so here's the adjusted fact pattern. Assume that in addition to the facts given, that the evidence was presented to the court that Smith, his wife, and their kids regularly used the account at Laker Express to fill up their personal vehicles. Does this change the outcome? All right, well, this is an additional fact for us, and what will this look like now? It makes us suspect now that the way that Tony Smith was operating, he was mixing up his personal with the corporate, all right, charging personal expenses, the gasoline for the personal vehicles, to his corporation. And so that may give some basis or some grounds to Laker Express to collect against the personal assets of the Smith family, or of Tony Smith and the Smith family. All right, so number one, given this new evidence, a court likely would or would not find that Laker Express was tricked or misled into dealing with the corporation rather than the individual. All right, I don't think you'll see fraud here though. All right, so would not. Number two, the court likely would or would not find that the corporation was undercapitalized. No evidence of that either, undercapitalization. Number three, the court likely would or would not find that the corporation was created to evade an existing obligation. Would not. Number four, the court likely would or would not find that the corporation failed to comply with the required corporate formalities and meetings. No evidence of it. Right, but we'll move on and look at number 5 here. The court likely would or would not find that the personal and corporate interests were commingled to such an extent that the corporation had no separate identity with regard to the relationship with Laker Express. The court likely would find that the personal and corporate interests have been mixed or commingled, and that would give a basis for the courts or the law to disregard the structure of the corporation, Smith Services Corporation. And so then number 6, because of these findings, the court likely would pierce the corporate veil and hold Tony Smith personally responsible for the debt to Laker Express. So the problem shows you 2 different scenarios, right? One additional fact changes our outcome entirely, and together the 2 aspects of this problem illustrate fairly well what we've been trying to learn about the corporate structure and piercing the veil in chapter 39. Right, we'll pick up later when we move into chapter 40.